Prophetstown burns along the Wabash as councils gather. Tecumseh calls a multi-nation alliance. The claim is firm land is held in common. The ground is the Old Northwest. Vincennes anchors United States power. Detroit faces Amherstburg. Tecumseh leads diplomacy and war council. Tenskwatawa urges renewal. Prophetstown at the Tippecanoe is both village and message. Cornfields ring the lodges. Belts and news arrive from lakes and prairies. At Vincennes, Governor William Henry Harrison reads tense reports. He vows to secure routes and enforce treaties, preparing to march if talks fail. Amherstburg holds powder lead and trade goods. British Indian Department officers promise supply and recognition. Everything depends on the lake line. The Confederacy is voluntary and diverse. Shawnee Potawatomi Odawa, Anishinaabeg, Miami, Lenape Wendat, Kaikapoi, Thakiwaki, Meskwaki. Councils decide by persuasion. Pressure comes from survey lines and settler advance. Warriors count powder by pouch. Villages guard corn stores. United States columns haul flour and small guns. From Prophetstown to Detroit and the Thames, unity will be tested by logistics. The record will show why resolve met limits and where the decision turned. A treaty session, signed without full consent, sparks protest across the Old Northwest. Tecumseh states a common land doctrine: no single band may sell what all hold. At Prophetstown, councils define the aim: stop further cessions and enforce unity in defense. The village stores corn, dries meat, and prepares belts and messages. United States officials at Vincennes manage annuity rolls and treaty enforcement. Their objective is secure routes, protect settlers, and prevent British influence on the frontier. British officers at Amherstburg maintain ties through gifts, powder, and recognition. Their constraint is the lake line. Every keg must cross the water. Shaawanwa, known as Shawnee. Envoys travel north and west with wampum. Wabash, Odawa, and Anishinaabeg messengers answer with pledges to stand together. Miamia, known as Miami Lenape Wendat, Kikaapoi Thakiwaki, and Meskwaki weigh the doctrine in village councils. Autonomy remains intact. Unity rests on persuasion. Survey parties cut lines through woods and prairie. For the alliance, each fresh blaze on a tree marks pressure to act. Agency warehouses issue rations and goods tied to treaty terms. Delays or short issues fuel suspicion that paper promises outrun reality on the ground. Prophetstown adopts discipline urged by Tenskwatawa. Alcohol is banned. Hunting rules are tightened, and visiting bands are urged to return to old practices. Tecumseh begins a southern circuit to invite Muskogee and other nations into the compact. The message is simple: hold land in common, refuse piecemeal sales. Harrison collects returns from posts along the Wabash and the Maumee. He argues that credible force will bring councils back to the table under American terms. Logistics snapshots diverge. United States columns rely on flour, salt, pork wagons, and a few light pieces. The alliance relies on village caches, swift movement, and captured or traded powder. Intelligence moves by runner and interpreter. Signals are belts and strings, not telegraph. Delay and rumor shape choices as much as orders. Amherstburg plans for a defensive screen if war widens. Presents are stacked muskets repaired and interpreters briefed on council protocols. Winter looms as a hard limit on travel and food. Both sides understand that decisions made now will carry into hunger or advantage when the ground freezes. By late council, the buildup is complete in intent, if not in arms. The Confederacy stands for common land and restraint. The United States prepares to compel peace. The British promise support if the lake can bear it. Vincennes Council opens with Tecumseh, stating the common land doctrine. Harrison listens, refuses to void the 1809 session, and ends the meeting without settlement. Messenger belts move from lakes to prairies. Wabash, Odawa, and Anishinaabeg runners carry pledges to stand together if survey lines advance. Prophetstown grows into a political and spiritual center. Visiting bands trade news, repair arms, and set rules for camp discipline. United States Scouts report thefts and reprisals along the Wabash Trace. Small clashes feed petitions for authority to act. Harrison seeks permission to march if talks fail. He argues that a forward camp near Prophetstown will compel assurances against raids. Tecumseh departs on a southern mission to widen the compact. He leaves counsel to Tenskwatawa and trusted captains. The Prophetstown Council bans alcohol and tightens hunting rules. The message is renewal and restraint joined to defense. The American column forms at Vincennes with regulars and volunteers. Wagons load flour salt pork and a few light pieces. The march pushes north through mud and timber. Pickets clash with scouts in the brush. Rumors of ambush circulate at every stream crossing. Near the village, envoys ask for time to meet in council. Harrison encamps on a rise with shallow ditches and stacked rifles. Before dawn, warriors strike the perimeter. Fighting surges through dark and smoke. Officers struggle to steady militia companies. Lines bend and reform around campfires used for light. Drums and calls move men in short rushes. The first assault fades, then returns. At daylight, the attackers break contact. Harrison orders a probe, then pulls back. Prophetstown is burned. The column withdraws downriver. Villagers scatter to winter camps. Corn stores are rescued where they can be. Tools and lodges are lost in the ashes. Tecumseh returns to a ruined center. He hardens councils to alliance and sends fast couriers toward Amherstburg. United States posts alert along the Maumee and Sandusky. New stockades rise. Convoys are scheduled with stronger escorts. Spring brings raids against isolated parties. Ambushes test routes and signal that the Confederacy is not broken. At Amherstburg, British officers repair muskets, stack presents, and brief interpreters. They promise supplies if war spreads. American command shuffles at Detroit. Hull takes over a nervous garrison and debates in advance toward the river towns. Skirmishes flicker along the river strait. Canoes shadow boats, shots trade at long range. Rumors of encirclement grow. Morale wavers inside Detroit. Civilians press officers for assurance. Ammunition and confidence are counted with equal care. Detroit capitulates under articles agreed with Brock and Tecumseh. The garrison will march out at the hour of 12 and lay down their arms. Articles of capitulation, excerpt, official terms. Detroit, 1812, 08-16. The capitulation releases muskets, powder, and stores to the victors. Allied warriors gain leverage in council and material strength for the campaign. Frontier calculations change. American plans pivot to rebuild on the Sandusky and Maumee. The alliance sees proof that unity can shift a theater. Runners carry the news west and north. Rising incidents now resolve into a campaign shaped by council's supply lines and the water that feeds them. Winter camps break, and councils send war parties to screen river roads. Objectives are simple. Hold the Wabash and Maumee lines. Deny convoys their timing. American command rebuilds along Sandusky and the Maumee. Depots stack flour, salt pork, and cartridges. Flatboats and wagons divide the risk between water and trace. Harrison assembles regulars and state volunteers. Mounted riflemen give reach. Light artillery offers moral weight and a few shells for forts. Tecumseh concentrates near Amherstburg with Allied warriors. British regulars under Proctor stand as the fixed point. The Indian Department keeps belts moving and issues powder. Rules of engagement are unsentimental. Seize boats, cut couriers, avoid set-piece battle unless ground and cover favor the alliance. American scouts ride in pairs at dawn and dusk. Signal shots echo through timber. Axemen push roads to shorten the bend of the river. Fort Meigs rises on the Maumee with earth and timber. Guns sight the river reach. Inside the works, the garrison counts days by ration issue. Proctor and Tecumseh move downriver and invest the fort. Batteries dig in on the bluffs. Allied warriors thread the woods beyond musket range. Rain turns the ground to mud. Guns trade fire across the river. The fort answers sparingly to conserve powder and keep embrasures from drawing aim. A relief column pushes up the river. Boats hug the bank. Orders stress speed coordination and no pursuit beyond cover. Ambush breaks the relief at the batteries. Short fights in brush and gullies leave prisoners and scattered dead. Inside the fort, Cheering rises, then falls to silence. Proctor lifts the siege when supplies thin and sickness grows. Tecumseh urges a decisive blow, but the calculus favors withdrawal to preserve strength. Harrison reports the post secure and turns to repair roads and boats. Commanders review picket spacing and punish straggling. Convoys resume under stricter rules. Summer brings a second attempt against Fort Meigs. Improved traverses and fresher stores blunt the pressure. Proctor shifts attention downriver toward Sandusky. At Fort Stephenson, the garrison refuses summons. Night probes find abatis and a steady rate of fire. Proctor breaks off with losses he can ill afford. The hinge moves east to the lake. American carpenters step masts and caulk seams. Stores pile high along the bay. Crews drill guns until recoil feels routine. Perry meets the British on open water. Broadsides decide what winter cannot. When the smoke clears, the lake line is lost to Upper Canada. Perry, dispatch line. Put in Bay 18113, 09, 10. We have met the enemy, and they are ours. Amherstburg cannot stand without the lake. Proctor orders a retreat upriver. Tecumseh screens the column and presses for ground where the alliance can fight on its terms. Villagers move with the column. Carts creak under children and corn. Blacksmiths walk and carry tools. Wagons bog where the river flat softens. American mounted troops ride hard on parallel traces. Scouts note broken wagons and dropped barrels. Guides mark fords that can bear a quick crossing. Proctor forms a line near Moraviantown. Regulars dress on the road. The river anchors one flank. Swamp and timber guard the other. Tecumseh arrays warriors in the woods beyond the British right. The plan is to break the American advance inside cover and roll the line from the trees. Harrison throws mounted riflemen at the road line. A short shock breaks the regulars. Prisoners and colors mark the collapse. The fight rushes into the timber. In the woods, musket flashes stitch the undergrowth. The action is close and brief. Allied warriors withdraw in order when Tecumseh falls. Fact versus folklore is noted. Accounts of the man who killed Tecumseh conflict. The record supports the pattern of the fight, but not a single uncontested name. Moraviantown burns. Families salvage what they can. The mission fields go black in the wind. Proctor rides out with a small guard and faces judgment later. Harrison records few losses and credits the hardest fire to the warriors under cover. He holds just long enough to collect prisoners, then returns to Detroit. Harrison, after action extract, Detroit River Line, 1813, 10:07. The enemy regulars gave way at the first shock while their Indian allies maintained a close and galling fire in the wood. The alliance fragments by necessity, not by choice. Without Tecumseh, councils turn homeward to protect families and corn. Winter will test every cache. American posts reopen the river road. Detroit becomes a hub again. Storehouses refill. Militia terms near expiry hasten decisions to consolidate. British command weighs the court-martial of Proctor. Words used later are harsh on energy and judgment. Officers study the retreat as a caution. Allied warriors disperse across the Great Lakes interior. Some remain with British columns, others shadow American convoys and watch for openings. The campaign closes with clear lessons. Lake control governs supply. Ground selection decides contact. Leadership binds coalitions that are otherwise only agreements between neighbors. Across the theater, civilians count losses and repair fences. Villages weigh moves and marriages. Armies keep ledgers and send returns to capitals. The confrontation pauses, but does not end the story. Amherstburg cannot be held once the lake is lost. Powder rations and presents no longer arrive. The retreat upriver begins under pressure and with little time. The British regulars form the spine but lack transport and fresh food. Wagons break on river flats. Sick lists grow. Ammunition is counted by handful. Tecumseh urges a stand on chosen ground with cover and bends of water. He argues that delay without supply only bleeds the alliance. Proctor chooses movement over fortification. Orders emphasize saving the column, not refighting the lake. The decision fixes the path toward the Thames. Villagers move with the troops. Children ride among corn sacks and kettles. Elders walk beside carts. The mission fields lie ahead as a hoped-for refuge. American mounted troops press from parallel traces. Scouts mark fords. The speed of horses meets the drag of wagons. The initiative shifts. Moraviantown becomes the place of decision. Regulars will hold the road. Allied warriors will hold the woods. River and swamp make a narrow battlefield. Human cost is measured in burned homes and winter hunger. Moravian Delaware families lose fields and lodges. Allied bands count dead and wounded by lodge. American losses are light at the road line and heavier where the timber fought back. Militia terms near expiry push a quick consolidation and return to Detroit. The British column survives but is reduced. Officers note missing wagons, scattered stores, and the drain of confidence that follows a rout on open ground. The alliance fractures without Tecumseh's voice. Autonomy reasserts itself. Some bands remain with British columns, others protect villages and seek new terms. Counterfactuals are disciplined and brief. If Lake Erie had remained in British hands, Amherstburg could have wintered, and a spring siege of the Maumee was plausible. If Proctor had fallen back sooner to stronger ground with prepared works, the road line might have held long enough for the woods fight to turn a flank. Yet structural forces from earlier chapters still bind the outcome. United States population stores and ship carpenters on the bay outweigh village caches and gift depots. Logistics decide campaigns. Lake control turned a frontier map into a retreat path. Powder and pork counted more than valor once distance ruled supply. Leadership binds coalitions of autonomous councils. With Tecumseh gone, shared doctrine lacked its chief interpreter in war and peace. Names persist where records allow. Tecumseh is memorialized at the Thames. Families of Moraviantown rebuild on new ground. Winter counts mark a fallen leader. The turning is complete when Detroit is reoccupied and river posts reopen under American flags. The corridor that empowered the alliance closes. The Confederacy's near success remains clear. Detroit's fall and the long screen along the rivers showed what unity could do until water and leadership failed. This pivot explains the rest of the story. After the Thames negotiations and removals replace coalition offensives. The balance that almost changed settles the other way. Detroit is reopened as an American hub. Storehouses refill ferries cross the river, and patrols fan out along old traces to reassert control. United States posts rise along the Maumee and Sandusky. New stockades, powder magazines, and ration sheds mark a permanent return to garrison life. Agency offices resume annuity rolls and issue lists. Names are counted, goods distributed, and travel permits noted in ledgers that now define movement. Provisional agreements follow the collapse of the alliance. Local chiefs seek terms to secure families and fields. Officers seek quiet routes for convoys. Shaawanwa, known as Shawnee, families regroup under pressure. Some move with British parties into Upper Canada. Others remain near older villages and agency posts. Bodwewadmi and Odawa councils balance hunting grounds against new posts. Fishing weirs and maple stands are kept if permits allow passage to seasonal sites. Anishinaabe bands adjust to shifting trade from British posts to American markets. Interpreters carry prices, promises, and warnings between shore towns. Miami, known as Miami villages, face survey lines near farms and river landings. Small reserves are proposed as a means to hold kin close to fields. Lenape and Wendat families rebuild after Moraviantown burns. Mission leaders request tools and seed. Diaries record shortages through the next winter. Kikapoi, Thakiwaki, and Meskwaki groups split paths. Some remain tied to British rations. Others shadow American roads and judge which agency will treat fairly. Health and demography show strain. Fevers follow movements, births dip, and winter stores run thin. Ledgers note medicine issues and burials by season. Schools appear around agency posts. Children are listed for instruction in letters and farm rules. Elders debate what can be learned without losing language. Ceremony and language continue in quieter rounds. Drums sound at night, names are renewed, and winter counts add figures for raids, treaties, and the fallen leader. Economic patterns reset. Fur declines and farm produce rises along the Sandusky and Maumee. Blacksmith shops trade iron for corn and labor. Land policy tightens. Surveys fix section lines. Preemption claims multiply. Later treaties will narrow communal holdings into smaller reserved tracts. British records close the campaign with Proctor's court-martial. The judgment travels back through councils as a caution about distant commands and broken supply. American returns from the Thames and Detroit enter state papers. They emphasize low casualties on the road line and the hard fire from the timber. Local memory marks graves and crossing places. Families tell where corn once stood and where scouts watched the bends of the river at dusk. By the mid-period after the war, movement becomes policy. Some bands sign for removal west, others bargain for small reserves near lakes and rivers. Continuance is the last word. Shaawanwa bodwewadmi, Odawa Anishinabeg, Mia Amia Lenape, Wendat, Kiika Apoi Thakiwaki, and Meskwaki. Endure, teach, and govern, carrying forward what the alliance tried to defend. The episode's core judgment is clear. A multi-nation alliance organized around common land doctrine and coordinated with British posts nearly shifted the balance in the Old Northwest. Logistics decided the arc. Control of Lake Erie cut powder and rations to Amherstburg and turned a defensive corridor into a retreat path up the Thames. Leadership loss fixed the turn. Tecumseh's death removed the one strategist who could bind autonomous councils in war and negotiation. American institutions adapted fastest. Depots, river roads, and mounted columns proved more durable than village caches and gift depots once the lake line failed. British lessons were blunt. Naval defeat erased Indian Department assurances. Divided command and slow transport undercut a sound frontier strategy. For the nations, the doctrine endures. Land held in common remains a principle taught in councils and classrooms alongside treaty history. Numbers and names remain contested. Reports differ on strength at Moraviantown and on the identity of the man who killed Tecumseh. The record preserves the pattern, not a single name. The role of Tenskwatawa invites debate. Some read renewal as cohesion. Others argue it complicated military timing. Both views appear in sources and memory. Commemoration fixes places of meaning. Prophetstown and the Thames are marked today by plaques, parks, and community ceremonies that stress survival rather than defeat. Archives and oral histories meet here. Returns articles and court records set dates. Winter counts, ledger art, and community memory preserve motive and cost. Continuance is present tense. Shaawanwa bodwewadmi Odawa, Anishinabeg, Mia Amia Lenape Wendat, Kikapoi Thakiwaki, and Meskwaki govern programs teach language and interpret this history for their citizens. Counterfactuals stay narrow. Without the lake reversal, Amherstburg might have wintered and relit the campaign. With it, the coalition's capacity narrowed to screens and raids. Scholarly consensus holds 3 points. Unity almost altered the theater, water and supply decided it, and leadership loss sealed the result. The event endures because it shows how principal logistics and leadership interact to shape continents, and how the nations involved continue adapt and remember.